From the highly secure, top secret, soundproof location. Jeff, you can put down the guitar. The guitar music can stop now, please. We're about to start the show.
I was playing with my teeth. It kind of hurt.
Okay.
It's not, my dentist hates that when I do that.
When you play the guitar with your teeth?
Yeah.
Anyway, we are here for the headquarters. We're here in the headquarters of the Spurs Insider Podcast for another edition, and all of a sudden, this is a podcast about a team that might be a playoff contender, might be a legitimate team that can win basketball games in the NBA. If you go back almost 2 months, this is a winning team, going back to mid-November. Is this a bit of a surprise to Jeff McDonald, beat writer for the Express News, who's also here with Nick Talbot, sports editor at the Express News?
When was our last podcast?
It's been a while. It's been about a week and a half.
Okay. So as we sit here today, the Spurs are in 9th place. The last time we had a podcast, the Spurs were in 9th place.
I think they were in 8th place, actually.
So they're fading fast.
It's a different vibe.
I know. I'm just giving you a hard time.
The Spurs have fewer losses than the 8th place team.
That is right. That is correct. And I usually go by the loss column because, you know.
The 8th place team is playing pretty good, though, and just beat them.
Yeah.
I am your host, Mike Finger. I did not say that earlier. We are back for another edition. The Spurs are coming off of a kind of a resounding, rousing victory at Toronto where they trailed by 16 points in the second half and came back with a lineup with an approach that kind of makes everyone happy. I mean, there was Marco Bellinelli, friend of the podcast, was on the floor for a lot of this comeback when the Spurs were playing zone defense. And, Lonnie Walker, who's played great, who's been a big part of the Spurs' improvement lately, was not having one of his better games. So Pop goes to Marco, looks for something, finds it in his own defense. And Marco misses a couple of shots that probably could have put the game away late in the game, but then comes back and hits the go-ahead shot. Lonnie Walker's on the floor for his defense, kind of helps put the game away with a rebound. It seems like Greg Popovich, the guy that everybody in San Antonio has loved to pile on lately, has been hitting the right buttons.
Everybody loves it, and nobody's complaining on Twitter.
Exactly.
The button that works the best
I'm
is
lying.
LaMarcus Aldridge from 3.
This is something that we could get into today. There are a lot of developments with this team that have been shockingly positive lately. And
shockingly.
The theme of the Spurs Insider Podcast here in the highly secure, top secret, soundproof location for a lot of the season has been all the things that have gone wrong and what the Spurs have to do to look towards the future in terms of rebuilding. This is a team now, like I said earlier, that has been a winning team for like 7 weeks now. If they're a winning team for the rest of the season, even a 500 team, they're probably going to make the playoffs. And there are good things going on. LaMarcus Aldridge turning into what Pop said in Toronto yesterday, LaMarcus Aldridge's twin brother. This guy that Jamarcus, who puts up 3-pointers at Davis Bertans type rate.
That's Jamarcus with a J.
Yes, Jamarcus with a J. He's added the J to his game. It's on one hand just totally fascinating how a guy can. It's not like he just started making them. Like he started taking them and taking a lot of them. Going from taking almost none to taking a lot of them. Like he's shooting 4 or 5 a game. Mm-hmm. And he's making more than 40% of them. Like he's among the league leaders if he was qualified. Mm-hmm. And he might have qualified yesterday, I'm not sure. But he's among the top 10, top 5 in percentage.
Has he hit a career high?
He's completely
yes.
changed. He's made his career high in 3-pointers. We're not even halfway through the season. He's on pace to more than double not only makes but attempts everything.
And it just started one game.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
There was a kind of an easing into it in mid-December. I wrote about this last week. There was a game, and I mentioned it to you. I was at the Brooklyn game in San Antonio, and I came into the press room that night, and I mentioned it's kind of weird. LaMarcus Aldridge finished his pregame routine, which he's a creature of habit. He's been in the league for more than a decade. He does the same thing before every game. And he finished his pregame routine there, shooting 8, 9 3-point jumpers from each spot around the arc. And I was like, I'm not sure if I'd remembered him doing that before. But he was making all of them. And my point that night was like, I guess it's never going to happen in a game, but he can make them if they're open. And all of a sudden, like he might have shot 2 that night, 2 or 3. It was that point when he was kind of quickly easing his way into it. And then all of a sudden he starts shooting 5 a night and making 3 of them, making 2 or 3 of them. It's been amazing. And I'm not sure why it happened all of a sudden, but it has changed the look of the entire offense.
There's been a concerted effort they have to shoot more threes, and that just seems to be one of the ways they're doing it is having their 4 or 5 man shoot threes like the rest of the world.
Which a lot of the rest of the world does.
For like a year and a half, the big question/issue with this team is how to make LaMarcus Aldridge and DeMar DeRozan coexist. How can those two coexist?
Right.
And they seem to have finally figured out the formula, but it's backwards than you would think.
Right.
Which is your guard doesn't shoot the threes, your 4 or 5 man does.
Yes.
And I think a lot of DeRozan's hot streak lately has been related to now somebody's got to go stand out there with LaMarcus, and it's just clear sailing for DeMar to the basket.
Absolutely.
Like his hot streak and LaMarcus's three-point shooting, it's almost game for game has gone hand in hand.
And it's not just, you say hot streak, which is accurate, but it's not just a week. Like, DeMar has been playing well for a while now.
Almost as long as, maybe longer than LaMarcus has been shooting the threes, but they definitely are related. I mean, it just opens up the floor. It's been what we've been saying that all along. What are they missing from last year? It's Davis Bertans, but he's not that great of a player. He just opens up the floor that much, and now you get a better player out there than Davis who's hitting these threes, who you have to guard on the interior, and you have to come out there. And it just completely opens up the game for DeMar DeRozan, who's just going wild now.
Correct. And you add to the mix the kind of the dimension that we've argued about in this highly secure room all year, but the Lonnie Walker, Marco Bellinelli thing. But Lonnie has been more and more integrated into the game plan. He's not the star every night. You know, there are nights when he gets more minutes than others, depending on how well he's playing. There's been good games and bad games. But having him play well even every other game off the bench has added something to LaMarcus hitting threes and to DeMar kind of taking over games as a driver.
And better defense.
And, you know, things are falling into place. And this still is not a contender to make the Western Conference Finals even, probably. But it's looking like a team that deserves to have a shot to make the playoffs. This isn't a tanking team.
Yes, that is true.
I think that's a big thing because last time we were here, we were like, well, there's no deserving team to make the 8th seed. I mean, that's the problem. It's just like what garbage team is going to make it.
Right.
And the Spurs might make it by default. And now with Memphis hot and the Spurs hot, it looks like a couple of teams are going to have to fight to actually earn it. And the Spurs might have a shot at doing that.
I just saw Memphis, and maybe I caught them on a good night, but man, they look pretty good.
Memphis has been good for a while.
Yeah, they look pretty good.
That game was the loss during this stretch in which the Spurs beat the top 2 teams in the East and maybe the 4th best team in the East.
Yeah, mm-hmm. yeah.
And they lose to Memphis, and for the casual fan that looks odd because Memphis has been bad for a while, and Memphis still is a team with a losing record. But Memphis has played really well, and in watching that game, Jeff, you covered it. It's not like the Spurs were just dropping the ball left and right. It was Memphis was making everything.
I thought the Spurs played pretty well.
And that was an entertaining Spurs loss.
Yeah.
In terms of, I mean, DeMar was taking over at times. LaMarcus was. Everybody seemed to be playing okay. They just couldn't stop every Memphis player from making 3-pointers.
Yeah, I mean, in that game, the Spurs made enough shots to keep it from getting out of hand, but every time they do that, Memphis would make enough plays to keep the Spurs from coming all the way back. And you give credit to Memphis for that. Like a young team that's run by a 20-year-old, you don't expect them maybe to make all those plays.
Right. And in that game, both teams were pushing 100 at the end of the third quarter, and the reaction to that when you see that kind of score is, the defense must have been horrible. And sure, the defense wasn't great, but when a team just has 5 guys out there just making every 3-pointer they attempt, that's different than just letting them get to the hole every trip.
Yes.
Sometimes you sort of have to live with it if a team's going to make every 3-pointer.
Yes.
How do you think the overall defense has looked during all of this?
I mean, it's definitely improving, but that's not hard to do considering it was just such garbage for so long.
Right.
And then on the flip side of that, I think there in some of those wins there was a little fool's gold. I mean, they're still giving up a ton of wide open threes.
Right.
It just comes down to, does the other team take advantage of it? And Milwaukee and Boston, for whatever reason, did not, and Memphis did.
Yeah,
but,
nor did Toronto.
But they're not just.
Right.
But also, I mean, they're not going to be a great defensive team anyway. And this in the NBA, you can't guard everything.
Right.
It's just impossible. So you have to give up something.
Along those lines, like Nick mentioned, the Spurs went on a 17-0 run yesterday against Toronto, and it's not like they were just locking down on defense during that. The Toronto was missing some shots.
Yeah.
But to the Spurs' credit, you're scoring enough during that time to make them pay for it. And this is a team that looked like it did not know how to win a lot of games early in the year when they were losing 8 games in a row and just finding new ways to fall apart at the end. And it wasn't pretty at the end against Toronto necessarily, but they figured out a way to do it. And they got contributions from, Derek White played well down the stretch.
Yep.
It just looks like there's a different vibe around this team all of a sudden now after the past few weeks than existed towards the end of December, even when they were winning some games.
Yeah, I think that's fair. You still don't know if it's too late.
Right. Too late for what?
Well, again, you're still in 9th place. You're still going to have to fight with Memphis. You're still going to have to go through that rodeo trip gauntlet where you could lose every freaking game, and then what happens?
Sure.
Yeah. And it's really going to be tough at this point.
Like, it would have been better. It would have been better to get it together where you have a bigger cushion. You're not losing to like Cleveland at home.
Of course, like the team that lost to the worst 2 teams in the Eastern Conference in Cleveland and Atlanta beat the best 2 teams in the Eastern Conference, and might have beaten the 3rd best depending on where you put Toronto. You're correct that this would have been better if it happened earlier, but what do we think of the idea that Pop was kind of tinkering with everything those first few months, and maybe the schedule will get more difficult, but he put Lonnie Walker through something that your analogy with this was this apple tastes great. Now we should have picked it 6 weeks ago, meaning he waited until Lonnie was ready to give him the responsibility. Could this be kind of true of the entire team, that they kind of had to go through what they did to get to this point?
Sure.
There's just 2 big changes, right? Lonnie was in the rotation, and then LaMarcus is shooting threes.
Right. And
that seems to have changed the entire dynamic. I don't know how much else has really changed. It just takes little adjustments. LaMarcus had to accept this at some point, that he needed to do this for prolonging his career, whether it was like, hey, you're not an all-star anymore, you're just a guy now if you don't do this, or what clicked. But it's changed the dynamic of the offense, and they're, I think, they've been like 3rd or 4th in offensive efficiency since he started doing this.
They're pretty good, and
that makes a big effort when your defensive efficiency is just average.
I don't want to be the Debbie Downer on the offense though, but can LaMarcus shooting 45% from 3, is that sustainable?
I doubt it, sir.
And
can
DeMar DeRozan shoot 64% from the field as he has the last 11 games? Is that sustainable?
I doubt it, sir.
And then what happens when both of those just drop a little bit?
Well, you have Bryn Forbes, who's not played great lately.
You think he'll regress to the mean?
Like, you have regression to the mean, and you have improvement to the mean from other guys.
Right.
So
before you talk about Bryn, you need to warn people that are listening if they don't want to hear like good things about Bryn.
Yeah, I'm kind of.
They should turn away for a while.
Jeff, I want to run this by you. I kind of just don't want to deal with bad arguments anymore. Like, you spend too much of your time, I spend too much of my time having the same arguments over and over again. And if some people just want to be unhappy and want to find things to
I get it.
And some people,
I get it.
Like, there's no way you would understand that, Jeff McDonald. They just want to find things to be upset about. And if you're upset about DeMar DeRozan is just packing the stat sheet and is not really a good player in the midst of a stretch when he's carrying this team to one victory after another against the best teams in the Eastern Conference. Like, I'm not going to waste my time on that. I'm not going to waste my time having the same arguments about Bryn Forbes, who is an unequivocal success story of this organization in terms of scouting and development and on down the line. One of many that this organization has had.
Many.
go down the line from, Gary Neal, Jonathan Simmons, the list of guys who are all flawed players, by the way, who are not star players on a championship team, who probably are not starters on good playoff teams.
And don't really succeed when they leave.
But to say that Bryn Forbes is just this jabroni reject that we should not be even seeing in an NBA uniform, I'm not going to waste my time with you people. Like, Bryn Forbes is not an elite player. He's never going to be an elite player. But I'm not going to waste my time on you people who do nothing during the day but complain about Bryn Forbes and why he's on the team when he is an unequivocal success story in the NBA in terms of what he has accomplished, what he was expected to be, and what he is. So I'm not going to deal with it. It's asinine for people to continue to obsess over Bryn Forbes during a period in which the Spurs are exceeding all expectations.
Okay, now that you've got that out of your system, I'd like to welcome everyone back to the podcast who hates Bryn Forbes.
And I'm not saying Bryn Forbes should play.
Okay.
Can they complain about Marco?
Again. People keep saying every time Marco slides down the list in terms of minutes played, in terms of contributions, every time he misses a shot, people say, see, the Spurs Insider podcast was wrong. We've never said Marco should play more.
Yeah.
We've never said that Marco should play more than Lonnie Walker. We've never preferred one to the other. It's the line was, we agree with you, but calm down. And looking back, we can talk about this now. Would the Spurs be in a significantly different position today if Lonnie Walker had played 25 minutes per game from the opening tip of the season?
I don't believe so, but I think the people you're talking to would argue that they would have won this game or that game. They lost so many close games, and he was certainly that much better than Marco that those minutes that he wasn't playing would be the difference.
I could accept that.
He would have won them games.
I could accept that he could win a game here or there. I also could accept that maybe they don't beat Sacramento that day when Marco wins in a game. Like it works both ways.
Right.
And if Lonnie Walker had dominated every game that he'd played in, that argument would hold a lot more water than reality when Lonnie's had his good games and bad games, which is totally to be expected from a young player in the NBA. Like, this podcast has never dumped on Lonnie Walker. We're very much pro Lonnie Walker. I think Lonnie Walker is a huge key to the future of this organization.
Absolutely.
And I think that the early part of the season, Pop is not infallible. Like, he makes mistakes from time to time. But I think that here's another dynamic that's interesting to me. People like to say that Pop will not tank. Pop will not consider sacrificing the season because he's selfish and he just cares about this year. In a way, his treatment of Lonnie Walker has been all about Lonnie Walker's future.
This is true.
Yeah, because to me, it seems like he's coaching Lonnie Walker like he's going to be coaching him the next 5 years.
Exactly.
Which Popovich is not a guarantee that he's going to be here the next 5 years. Someone else is going to be coaching Lonnie eventually.
I would guarantee the opposite, to be honest.
Yeah.
In a way, Pop's handling of Lonnie Walker has been one of the least Pop selfish things that he's done in terms of how he's coached this season, because he's clearly even the people who are outraged at Pop about Lonnie Walker and Marco Bellinelli I think they would concede that Pop is trying to develop the kid.
They concede nothing.
You're right.
Mm-hmm.
They concede nothing.
You're right.
It's because Bellinelli has some sort of mystical hold over Pop.
That's dude does not abide.
But okay. Again, now I'm violating everything that I said earlier in terms of not arguing with miserable people.
Go ahead.
But
sorry, I brought it up.
Without castigating.
Also, this whole podcast is you arguing with miserable people.
This is true, but we can't. You have to be here. Like, you're contractually obligated to be here. So we have to let some miserable people who, by the way, we're still seeking a sponsor for the Spurs Insider podcast, and you might hear Jeff McDonald sipping beverage out of a styrofoam cup. It is no longer a Polar Pop, and we are not going to tell you what brand name is on the styrofoam cup as much as I'd like to, because that would be giving away sponsorships for free.
Yeah, it would be a tough sponsorship because I'll just say it's a burger place, and
Yeah.
I think their burgers are garbage.
Ouch.
I never eat. I go there and I eat the salad.
You had the salad.
If,
with
I
that?
had the salad.
if people knew what you were talking about, there would
It would be a problem.
we would need an entire 2-hour podcast to discuss this.
It would be a problem.
I think I've tweeted about it before, actually.
All I'm saying is we're looking for a sponsorship. We're still working on the brick and mortar podcast store. That might not happen. In the meantime, you can go subscribe to the Spurs Nation newsletter and read Express News coverage at expressnews.com. But what I was going to say about the Greg Popovich handling of Lonnie Walker is we can talk about whether he should have played him earlier. Okay, maybe he should have. Not every move that Greg Popovich makes is perfect or the best move that an NBA coach could make. He makes his mistakes. He will admit that. But I have never doubted for a second that Greg Popovich has had a plan for Lonnie Walker, that Greg Popovich believes that Lonnie Walker is a key part of this organization's future, and that every move he has made with Lonnie Walker has kept both the long-term interests of the San Antonio Spurs and the long-term interest of Lonnie Walker IV in mind. So that's what I'll say there. And I think that if Lonnie continues on his current trajectory, that the plan will have worked out pretty okay.
Pretty okay.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
And again, to go back to the catchphrase, I have agreed consistently that Lonnie should play more in a perfect world, but it's not the defining decision or story of this season. Like I will accept that maybe the Spurs might have won, if you consider the good games and the bad games, 1 or 2 more games with less Marco Bellinelli this year. So I'm not totally convinced of that.
So when they miss the playoffs by 1 or 2 games,
then we can talk about it. We could talk about it. I just doubt it.
Yeah, I agree.
And some of the people who are on the Lonnie should have played more from the jump bandwagon are also on the tank bandwagon. So you got your way there if they missed the playoffs by 1 or 2 games. Because now they're in the lottery instead of the playoffs.
I don't know. I think the defining part of the season is what we've already talked about. It's going to be LaMarcus Aldridge and changing his game. And I don't think there's any.
That's a good segue, Nick Talbot, and we can get to.
Where's Ringo, by the way?
We should have mentioned this earlier. Ringo's on the road. Ringo is somewhere between the moon and New York City, or between Toronto and Miami, which is one of the best road trips of the year.
Yeah, I think he's doing like a Scarface reality tour on South Beach.
He might be doing that. I think he likes to pick him up a Cuban sandwich in Miami. That's always good.
As one does.
As one does.
And should.
But the segue that Nick Talbot made earlier that Jeff McDonald interrupted with his...
Sorry.
But legitimately, correctly interrupted, because we should have acknowledged Ringo much earlier, was the LaMarcus Aldridge thing. And we have discussed on this podcast before about whether the Spurs should consider trading these guys. Are they on the trade market? Are they not? That we've never had a definite answer on that. We've never even had a definite recommendation, I don't think, for them. Now it looks like both of those guys, LaMarcus and DeMar, are here.
Yeah, I think you got to write out the season.
Yeah,
for sure. I think you got to write out the season. For sure.
Unless this next month just completely tanks for some unknown reason that is not showing on the court right now.
A problem with all of that, and Jeff has mentioned this before, is the trade deadline is February 6th. And
right at the beginning,
when the rodeo road trip starts, and the rodeo road trip is probably going to define whether or not they're a contender, and you're just not going to be able to.
That rodeo road trip is right now. It's of the 8 games, 6 are against teams that would be in the Western Conference playoffs.
Yes.
So I don't know,
including I think two at Oklahoma City.
Yeah, 2 at Oklahoma City, and then the other 2 are at Portland and at Sacramento. Normally there's some
Utah.
Yeah, I was talking about the guys.
Oh,
the
the
teams that
the
weren't.
non-playoff teams.
Yeah.
Even the non-playoff games are games that are going to be tough to win. Sacramento.
There's no East. I mean, there's no. Usually they have like an Eastern Conference leg where they can bank some wins. There's none of that. It's all
Nope.
Western Conference powers.
My point in bringing that up is they could decide February 6th that, hey, we're in the hunt and we're
Then have
gonna
an 8-game
stand
losing
pat,
streak.
and then have an 8-game losing streak and not be able to deal with it. But I think that's just you just kind of have to accept that.
Yep.
There's
Yep.
no way around it. You
Yep.
can't dump those two guys. The other thing that we've acknowledged all season long is you're not going to get, top 3 lottery type picks for DeMar DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge on the trade market. You're not going to get Luka Doncic type returns on them. It's not like you just dump them and automatically get the next Tim Duncan.
No, you're going to get bottom of the first round.
So, there's absolutely no, I can't envision any scenario where they, A, decide that they want to trade either one of them by February 6th, and B, get the type of return that would make that worthwhile.
Nope.
It's still the issue that we brought up before with DeMar's free agency next summer still is going to exist, and
Yes,
it's still a problem.
That's something that's going to be a tough thing this summer.
Because he
might just opt in. I don't know.
He might, but if he opts out,
Then I don't know what you do.
it's going to be tough to say that they should match whatever offer he gets in the market, because he's going to be one of the top guys on the free agent market, and he's doing himself some favors now by the way he's playing. Like, he's making himself attractive. He's not going to get max money, but he's going to get decent money. So there exists the reasonable scenario that the Spurs might lose DeMar DeRozan next summer for nothing. And I think they just kind of have to live with that now.
Yeah.
The upcoming schedule, we're winding down here in the secure location. We have the Ringo is with the Spurs on Wednesday at Miami, which should be an automatic win the way they played against the rest of the elite
Right.
Eastern Conference.
Right.
And then you return it home against Atlanta, and that's probably a loss.
Right.
But this is kind of the last chance at winnable games before that rodeo road
Yeah,
trip.
it's kind of a huge stretch. Like, they can't be screwing around losing to Atlanta. And, I mean, there's other ones in there. They play Phoenix in there a couple times.
There's a couple of Phoenix, home and home at Phoenix. There's a couple of home games against the teams they just played on the road in terms of Miami and Toronto.
Mm-hmm. There's
There's
a Pelicans game in there.
a game at the Pelicans, which is not automatic by any means.
I mean, none of these are automatic.
No.
But it's certainly softer than playing Milwaukee twice in a row and like the games they won.
They need to keep this up until the first week of February when things are going to
Charlotte,
get
like
rough.
they've got Charlotte at home. Like, you just can't lose any of those.
Right. What's your forecast? We tend to end a lot of
Cloudy
these
with
the
a
same
chance
way.
of meatballs.
Yeah, that's great. There's been podcasts this year where we've ended thinking the Spurs are still favorites to win the playoff spot. There's been podcasts where it looks not so great. Where are we leaning now percentage-wise in terms of are they going to get that 8th seed? Better than 50%?
I think it's better than 50%, but that rodeo trip scares me.
I would agree.
I don't know if it's better than 50%, just because I think other teams are kind of getting better as well. Like the Memphises of the world are going to get a little bit better.
If you look at it, I think Memphis is the only one.
Yeah.
Like, Phoenix is still on the fringe. Portland is just imploding.
Yeah, I keep waiting for Portland to improve, and I know that Nurkic needs to come back for them to
And
actually improve. I don't know when that's going to happen.
And we don't believe Zion coming back is going to be the thing that fixes the Pelicans.
No, Zion
because they're not that far out of it.
They're a tier below, but they're within a hot finish of getting there. I just don't think they're really it.
I look at Sacramento's roster and I say, well, this is a team, but then it's just not.
No.
They've been a year away for like 3 years now. It seems like
Sacramento. It's just I don't know. I don't understand it because I look at the pieces and I think it's good, and then it's just not.
Memphis is going to be a power for a while. I think. Like, I love Ja.
You like Ja?
I love Ja.
Ja is going to be something.
He's okay.
He's okay.
Is
Okay,
Ja?
sure.
Where is Ja?
Maybe
That
I
was
like
the
that
Spurs trying to defend him the other night.
Exactly. Where is Ja? They're going to be a power for a while. I'm not sure that they hold on because young teams it takes a while. You've seen like this that was Sacramento last year.
Yeah.
They were hanging around that 8th seed, and then they kind of fell apart at the end.
And I haven't really like broken down Memphis' schedule. What does that look like? Do they have a brutal 8-game stretch that they're not going to be able to handle? Like
everybody in the West has those.
Yeah.
Like no one has an easy schedule the rest of the way because you play everybody else, and all those are losable.
So that's
games.
why when Memphis goes into L.A. and beats the Clippers by 30, like that is not good if you're the Spurs.
Right.
Like you need them to lose those.
I still. To finish this, I don't think the Spurs are automatic. I don't think that they are. I wouldn't bet the house on them making the playoffs, but I think that they are the odds-on leader.
And I take them over the field, is what I'm saying.
I would too. And I think even if you look at some of the statistical forecasters out there, like the Spurs numbers in that have been improving greatly over the past few weeks. It looks like the analytics are catching up on them, and kind of they don't have them at over 50%, but they have them as the leader or one of the leaders. And I think, as we've mentioned before, the Spurs probably want that spot as much as anybody.
Yeah,
and that will give them advantage. We will. It had been a couple of weeks since our last one. We're going to try to do this more regularly once Ringo gets back and things settle down a little bit.
Do you think Ringo's going to come back from South Beach, or he's going to lose his mind and stay there?
He might just set up shop.
Yeah,
I mean, bring his drum kit.
There's going to be a video of him like shirtless at the Sky Bar at 4 a.m.
What's it called? The Clevelander?
Yeah, the Clevelander.
Down there, next to the what's the hotel that was in Something About Mary, the Cardozo.
Like, I don't know. What am I like?
Well, that's
Mr. Hollywood. I'm
referencing 20-year-old movies. But yes, Ringo.
I'm not up on my pop culture.
If Ringo, who's your Oscar favorite?
My Oscar favorite?
1917.
I can't wait to ask this. I can't wait for this answer. Jeff McDonald, who's your Oscar favorite?
I like, what's the guy in the Maltese Falcon? That guy.
Oh.
Yeah, that should be good.
Humphrey Bogart. Okay, then.
Next Spurs Insider podcast, we will talk about all of the movies that Jeff McDonald has not seen in the 2010s and 2020s. Until then, Spurs are continuing their playoff pursuit, and we will catch you in a future episode. Until then, take care of each other and keep it real.